Okay. Hey guys, I'm Matt Lighty. This is the quick little patch note overview for 3.27 Keepers of the Flame. We just had the patch drop today after the reveal stream. And I just want to preface this video with this is only going to give you about 50% of the information that you need if you are trying to adequately plan and prepare for the League launch. That is unfortunately just a cadence of the times. They omit such large amounts of important information now and drip feed it to you that there's just these patch notes are basically half an answer. So keep that in mind. I'm not going to go over every single minutia of it. I suggest you reading it yourself, and if you want, there really isn't that much. This league and this league and this patch is just not that large for content. So that's that. I'm just going to read off of a Twitter post because it goes over a TLDR of everything there is to really discuss. I'm just going to read it verbatim and then expound on them if they require expounding. So there is zero info in here about the bloodline ascendancies, the new skills, the supports, crafting modifiers, or the Fellborn roles, which is the entire point of this expansion, which means the bulk of the information we would want to make an educated decision on what we want to play and how we want to invest our time as consumers. None of that's in this fucking patch, okay? None of it. We know that things exist, we just don't know the extent of what they are. Now, do we need to know what every single Fellborn unique does? No. No, that's like a greedy thing on my behalf I might want. But to not have the skill information in the patches, to not have, especially the bloodline ascendancies, which is like a huge part of picking your build, because these are not additional ascendancies. These are on top of. You get 8 ascendancy points, right? And you could disperse them amongst any bloodline things on top of your ascendancies. So this is like huge as far as the choices you're making. It's about also because the content, you have to unlock these. So it's like if I'm going to spend a week trying to unlock Oshabi so I could then kill her and then get the Primal Owl thing and choose to spend my Uber lab on that, that's like a lot of effort for me to not know what the other ones are. That's a fucking bummer. So none of that shit being in the patch. Again, a huge amount of information missing. Secondly, and this will make more sense as we progress through, there is zero mention of adjusting boss drop rates, which I am highly skeptical about, considering last patch 3.6 through 2.6 we had a few shadow nerfs for bosses, including massive ones that led to items that were 1 to 2 chaos becoming 50 divine in trade. That would ruin a trade player's week if they're trying to build around what they thought was an accessible item that is now incredibly expensive out of their budget, right? That would suck for most people. Now, in the previous patch, there was something that had a line even as small as, we have adjusted the drop rates of boss uniques. Sure, I'm not expecting numbers, but to not even include the sentence is wild. There's no reference to the adjusting boss drop rates. So if there is no adjustment, fantastic, no issues, everything's copacetic. We know the drop rates right now, so I'm going to be looking at them after a week or two, and if they are fucking totally different, like, that is just such an unfortunate thing to not be telling players. Like, it's so slimy to not saying that, just, hey, a heads up, some things that you might think are accessible are no longer accessible. Like, that is all you have to say. And then we could then plan accordingly, but it's just like so fucked to not know that. So again, you don't have to tell me the exact numbers, but just say if anything happened, right? Like, that's crazy that it didn't. Moving on. So the patch itself had a bunch of, had some buffs and then like way more nerfs, which is not super surprising, but there was only a couple like huge blindsides. Assassin I wrote buffed because it's like, he's different. He's not strictly better. There are some snares where it might be worse, but overall Assassin I would say is buffed and has changed positively. Various skills were buffed by like 10 to 20% numerically. An example of this is like Cyclone does 20% more damage. Does this mean that Cyclone is going to be one of the best skills? No. But if you were already playing Cyclone, fantastic, it's now better. Bladefall is now better by an amount. So some things like that were buffed. Minion attacks now inherently always hit. What this means is you no longer have to give a shit about minion accuracy, which a lot of minions didn't, but like, great, that's fantastic. Syndicate Medallion's drop rate was buffed. We don't know by the amount. It was like horrendous before. So maybe if it's like 1 and 2 safe houses drop a medallion, that'd be way better. But it was pretty bad. You can go 10. I did like 15 safe houses and then get a medallion. So hopefully that's fixed. Settlers multi-job recruits were buffed by being nerfed, i.e. there's less likely to have multi-role workers, and then the cost for them is actually lowered. So it should be a lot easier to set up your settler stuff, which is pretty nice. They nerfed volatile cores, and like every which way you can now mitigate them and block them and do a bunch of stuff. So nerfing them is a buff for us. Harvest meta mods have now been expanded to include the cannot roll XYZs. So you can have like can't roll attack, can't roll caster. You can now use those with harvest metacrafting, which is pretty substantial. And then the final buff I have here is that Fizz Daggers have received an amount of a buff by like a small amount, so that's cool. Nerfs. This first one is like a nerf by proxy of being like lazy. The Uber Fragments drop rates was quote unquote increased by an amount because of the pool dilution from adding the 3 Uber bosses from the previous set of Pinnacle bosses. But they don't specify what, so this is like, I'm assuming this is going to honestly feel like the same, if not worse. But if it is better, then that's fantastic. But I just knowing the history of them, and almost exclusively when they word things these ways, it just feels worse. Risk Scarab, totally fucking nerfed. Capped at 1. Edifice, basically just dead. Blooming, dead. Val Breach, removed from the game. Gravicious Transportation, massively nerfed in Betrayal, so don't run that. Mining Byproducts, Atlas Noobs, nerfed, no longer provides Azerite. Rogue Exiles now drop fewer regular items, aside from their base equipment, so that seems like a nerf. Gigantic Rogue Exiles Ritual, this was nerfed, but this is really just a bug fix. Still technically a nerf. People had a whole economy around selling these vessels, but that was nerfed. The biggest thing I saw here, just kind of came out of nowhere, Spell Suppression was nerfed by a large amount, so it now only mitigates 40% versus 50%. Pretty huge. Yeah. Hex Touch support was nerfed for the Coiling Whisper setup, and the Delve Curse Rings were basically just removed, so they're just gone. So setting up the Coiling Whisper Soul Eater thing, we don't really know exactly how it's going to be. We are assuming it's going to be much more setup intensive, or maybe you just have a harder time, or it's impossible to potentially sustain single target Coiling Whispers. But right now, Coiling Whispers is an incredibly common drop of an incredibly easy boss, and this is very easy to set up based off the drop rate that I'm suspecting is going to be nerfed, but they say it's not going to be nerfed, but we'll find out. We'll see. Bama and Snaking got fucking Orbital Strike nerfed, so I don't know why they nerfed Snake. Like, Snaking was such a mediocre skill. It's like one of the best slam skills, but it's just like not that good, really. So to see Snaking nerfed, I don't get it. Trickster got nerfed again. Still gonna be fine probably, but sure. Elementalist got nerfed they gut Liege of the Primordial by 50%. So instead of 100% buff on golems, it's now 50. But they didn't touch Primordial Bond. So the Everyman version of this being good was nerfed, but the degenerate stacking of large clusters of megalomaniacs not touched. It's like, to me, that's so backwards. Like, you're punishing casual players, but then just like not really shitting on the people running multiple one passive voices and like 9 primordial bonds. Okay, whatever. The Whisper Amulet was nerfed, but barely. I was so surprised to see this. Like, the ES went from 300 to 400 to 50 to 100. Obviously, that's a big amount, but they didn't change what makes it so fundamentally absurd. And it's like, okay, so I have 15,000 ES on my Frost character. That's immortal, face tanks all content in the game, you just right click and everything's dead. If I go from 15,000 to even 12,000 ES, nothing changes. Nothing. At all. And the amulet is just as accessible. It's like a super common drop because they said they didn't change the drop rate, so super common drop, and that's it. It's okay, so that's still like absurd. Yeah, that's like not a big deal. I was really expecting a big nerf to that. This is like the tamest nerf. I thought they were going to nerf it and then move it to Ubers, but they didn't do that. So at least they said they didn't do that. I think they're lying, but we'll see. Then finally, this is a big patch. They added a bunch of wand skills, but they just like nerfed every wand base by a sizable amount. I don't really know why, but yeah, they just started going after wand bases. You know, like the 1.5s became 1.4s. That one's you know, better, but like the 1.6 bases are gone, I believe. I don't know why they were nerfing wands. Crit rate was lowered. Yeah, some of them, which I just can't, kind of seems out of left field. But either way, okay, so there's like some specific stuff I missed, but these are like the biggest overarching things. So I would, again, if you care about specific builds, like if you play, oh, I don't know, Exsanguinate, right? Exsanguinate got a 15% damage buff. It was already fine. Now it's just a little bit better. Yeah, so look up your own build specific things. Again, a lot of skills were buffed by 10 to 20%. Nothing was buffed by an amount where it's like, ooh, I gotta play that. Really. It's just, if you were already doing a version of this, I would say that, you know, is better. But there are things, like I said, like Bama, like they do 30% less damage. Like, that's if you were gonna play Bama, I would play something else, you know? In no way is like a 35% increased damage to Siege Ballista of Charth that's good enough to play it. But like, Bama is good enough to not play it, okay? Like, Volatile Dead getting 25% damage increase, is it going to make it the new hot shit? Yeah, no, probably not. But it's better. So if you was like on the cusp, it's like these are cusp buffs. If you were on the cusp of playing it, sure, go for it. I don't think it's going to break the bank. But if you were going to play Snaking, I would play a different slam skill. If you were going to play a Bama, I would play something else. If you were going to play a Trickster, I would maybe even play something else, you know? That sort of stuff. But yeah, that's it. That's the TLDR. Read through yourselves. And again, all these patch notes, they don't fucking matter, because either if it's based off of last thing, in the next week, we're going to see 6 different amendments and a fucking massive FAQ that's going to basically be as extensive as these patch notes. And even then, we're going to probably be missing a quarter of the picture, because I think they're still working on stuff. I don't even know what's happening, but regardless, it's going to be a fun time. The actual league mechanic, kill stuff in a circle, make a few items, can change some unique so they're different. Sounds great. Not too complicated. It's just Breach. It's just Breach, but more Breach. So that seems great. I encourage you to read the patch notes if you are on the fence or someone who can't re-roll, like you don't have a lot of time to play and you're like, I got to stick with one build that's going to be cracked. I want to play this. Yeah, do that. I would do that. And then pick something definitive and read through patch notes, because it's going to be a big difference, especially when we know that from this patch, respecking your passive tree with gold is like 600,000 gold. So it's not cheap to re-roll from that metric. But yeah, that's it. Let me know what you think about the patch. I'm not particularly shocked or surprised. They're on schedule, and because of that, I assume everything's going to be light and half-cooked, which is right on pace where I expect it. I expect a light league that's half-cooked with a lot of patches and a lot of amendments, and if I had to recommend, I would probably just in general say don't play the first 2 weeks, because it's probably going to be the worst version of the game, and after that, most of the kinks will be worked on, and then you won't see a patch for the next 3 months, if it's anything like Mercenaries. So yeah, but it's going to be a fun time because PoE is great. So that's it. If you have any questions, yeah, I'm Matt Lighty. Have a good day. Bye-bye.